So I think it's urgent because of the land that may be converted into something else, and also it's more urgent that this may possibly result in collective global environmental problem. So if in the event of massive destruction of the island's green agricultural environment to pave way for the construction of maritime city, boasting of a modern luxurious city lifestyle for the wealthy. So what can indigenous people do when they have little power in deciding the fate of their ancestral territories? Is in a system of perpetuated hegemonic domination. How can their voices of concerns for the natural environment and their cultural traditions be heard? Okay, so while ethnomusicologists and the Mah Meri seem powerless in advocating change, it is in actually small collective voices that have led to big changes in history. So in James C. Scott's Weapons of the Weak, he talks about how peasants in Malaysia resist their oppressors by using techniques such as foot dragging, feigning ignorance, slander, arson, and sabotage. So all these kind of forms of resistance may seem trivial, but these tactics can actually delay actions, they can divert original policies, and they may invoke changes in time. Another person said, Nicholas states, one of the ways to address rights to ancestral territories is to provide evidence of primal presence or occupation on the land by gathering evidence from oral traditions that speak of how various places can be named. So if you find songs or you find poems or something that actually address certain places in Carey Island, those can be actually used for evidence that they were there originally, they were the original people there. Okay, he gives an example. For example, the Semai is another group of ethnic indigenous people, have a story about the naming of the rock of Barachi in Ulu Telem. So this can be some kind of use for evidence of claims of territory. So in the next two videos, I will just show examples of how music and performance have functioned as forms of resistance towards the intrusion of sacred land and environmental degradation. This is resistant in Hawaii. So in 2019, the Hawaiians gathered to protest the building of a 1.4 billion observatory that would house a telescope known as the 30-meter telescope on Mauna Kea. So the summit, the Mauna Kea, is actually an ideal location to look into deep space, but it's also the sacred mountain of the Hawaiians. So this is performing hula in protesting this. So the resistance is part of a long history of colonization began when Hawaii was annexed by the USA. And the Hawaiians lost their sovereignty, their land, and their culture was suppressed by the law and religion. Prior to this, there were other resistance when activists focused on stopping the US military from using Kaho'olawe, one of the main Hawaiian islands, as a target for bombing practice. After more than a decade of peaceful protests and occupations of the island, the US government ended the live fire training in 1990s. So in some ways, this kind of small resistance may result in changes. One more example. In 2013, Navikula, a rock band in Bali, composed a song known as the Orang Utan. I think you call it orangutan here, but we call it orang utan. Okay, it tells about the orang utan's loss of habitat as the government continues to deforest areas of Bali. So this is a part of this, the lyrics. Orangutan, his home is in the wilds, guarded by his father and mother. Now, no, orangutan are adopted by jungle encroachers and are taken to the city as human entertainment. So this is a video of the rock band. They do have a lot of supporters. So Navikula actually toured the jungles of Kalimantan and wearing tiger suits. They were in tiger jumpsuits, and they toured Kalimantan with Greenpeace to raise awareness of the devastating impact of deforestation. They actually rode for 12 days on motorbikes over these tough terrains to talk about this issue. So these are the two examples on ecomusicology. So let's revert back to the Mah Meri. A little bit on the theory of ecomusicology. This is something kind of growing. It's not new, but it's growing. So the earliest researchers to talk about this is Allen, who theorized that ecomusicology is the study of music, culture, and nature, which considers musical and sonic issues, both textual and performative, related to ecology and the natural environment. In 2013, Titan states that ecomusicology is the study of music, culture, sound, and nature in a period of environmental crisis. Later, Allen and Dawei propounds that there is no single definition of ecomusicology, suggesting the term ecomusicologist as a dynamic field shaped by diverse political, economical, social, and cultural contexts and based on time and relevance. So I take this as something that we can explore this theory. It doesn't necessarily mean that the indigenous people are voicing out their plights. So I'm trying to explore it based on how me as a researcher can sort of help them to channel their songs into sort of this ecomusicological perspective. Okay, before that, already in the early years, people have been talking about the relationship between music, sound, and environment. So the earliest researchers were Stephen Feld with his Sound and Sentiment, and also Anthony Seeger and with Y.S. Suyasing, but it was not actually specifically focused on talking about environmental issues. Later on, Nancy Gee talked about the river in Taiwan. Let me see. Anyway, Nancy Gee's paper, one of the first that talked about ecomusicology, she talked about how the composers in the early 1930s were talking about the beautiful scenic scenery in Taiwan near the Taiwan River, and later on, towards the later part of the end of this 20th century, they talked about how the river is polluted because of the major city there. And also, Heavenlies has talked about Yan Shen Tai, about how Yan Shen Tai is talking about environmental crisis, that the minorities are talking about environmental crisis that is going on in their areas. And we have also Brian Dietrich that recently published on summoning breadfruit, and recently also two researchers from Thailand talked about the eco-friendliness. So these are the papers that have been published on ecomusicology. Okay, so what do I think of ecomusicology? What I want to say is it's not the Mah Meri who are actually talking about ecomusicology, because they sometimes, maybe they are a little bit naive, but they don't think in this way. They don't think like they want to go and protest something, because originally the Orang Asli are very well known for being people of non-violence. For centuries, when invaders came, they would just run. They would not be known to flee, to fight. So this is the nature of the Mah Meri. So I'm trying to explore whether I, as a cultural advocate, can channel some of my understanding from historical research on their songs to sort of advocate some environmental concerns. And at the same time, I want to see whether me as a cultural advocate may serve to influence the people on how to talk about their problems through song and performance. Okay, so it's not them talking about it and me looking at it. So what was I looking at? So in 1906, Seed and Blackton, two English anthropologists, collected 42 songs from the Mah Meri. They actually wrote it up in Mah Meri language and translated it all into English. So among the 42 songs, 25 songs were all about animals. Very detailed descriptions of animals, how they behave, how they would the hunt, how they capture. Everything was about the animals. 5 were about fruits, 5 were about birds, 4 about trees, and 3 about lifestyle. Okay, let me just show you an example. For example, the description of the black-handed gibbon, the siamang. This is a description of how the behavior of the siamang, how it likes to go into the forest, it will pluck this fruit called the ludan, and it will munch it, and there's a loud munching sound, and then it will splatter the husk of the fruit. And of course, it tells about how the siamang is actually captured by the Mah Meri for its tasty meat. So this is about quickly to get your blowpipes. Because the gibbon is here, we will carry him backbended, and then so this is about the description of the hunt, the capture, and later on actually how they roast the siamang, because they will put cumin and black pepper and pepper on it to roast it. This is just part of the song. So that's one song. And then this is another song describing the crocodile. The actual description of the crocodile, whose head is knobby and lumpy, whose tail is like a blade sword, whose teeth clench together, and in every river pool that dwells the crocodile. And it also tells about how the crocodile captures the monkey. So there sits a monkey upon the timber. The crocodile smothers him within the river mud, and when he is dead, it bears him shoreward and batters him on the timber to kill him completely, and swallows him whole when dead completely. It's like, I didn't know that, you kill a monkey this way, the crocodile kills a monkey this way. But this was another interesting song that the Mah Meri, because they observe it, they were actually composing songs about it. Okay, one last one. This is about the wild pig. This is actually the wild boar. So the wild boar loves to come into their villages and feed on the sugarcane and sweet potatoes that they plant. So description of the wild boar, whose feet are sharp and pointed, whose shoulders are sloping and slanting, whose bristles are stiff and stubborn. So on and on. This is really this detailed description about the physical characteristic of the wild boar that the anthropologists actually managed to translate. Okay, so that was the early 1906. So comparatively, when I look at songs collected by Wazir Jahan Begum Karim in the 1980s, she only managed to collect 7 songs. And out of the 7 songs, there were only 2 about animals, 2 about birds, 2 about ancestral spirits, and 1 about the natural environment. And I'm not sure what happened to the other songs, but the 25 animal songs didn't seem to exist. I mean, I'm not sure people knew how to sing it anymore. Okay. And lastly, when I came to the village, I collected 9 songs. Similarly, 2 about animals, 2 about birds, 2 about ancestral spirits, 1 about culture. So from this decline, it tells us something about the environment. So a comparison of the song text of the Mah Meri in the early 1900s provides revelations to the changing ecosystem in Carey Island. So in the early 1900s, the songs about nomadic land and sea, Mah Meri described the physical features, behaviors and movements of the native flora and fauna of its mangrove forests. Okay, then I took this very good. Okay, then in Mah Meri's Concepts of Living Things, Wazir Jahan Begum collected 7 songs, and these were the songs he collected. So in the 1900s, the numerous songs on native flora and fauna of Carey Island had disappeared. Fragments of verses from old songs were combined with new song texts, depicting the life of a settled people that include descriptions of domesticated plants and animals. So the native animals were not less. The partial fragments of the verses still existed, but integrated in these fragments were songs about domesticated animals and about plants that they planted, like sugarcane, that is something that you grow, and it's not part of the native forest. So this was what we found. So from here you can see there's a mixture of the crab has a house. He looks for the kanji fruit near the sugarcane plant. So sugarcane is already something that is domesticated. You are planting it. And then it's not so much focused on the physical characteristics of the animals. It certainly talks about, oh, this is a traditional song. Then it talks about the ancestral spirits, because once you are in a settled village, they have certain ancestral spirits that they actually call for help. So when the villages are settled, they have these ancestral spirits. Yeah, so this has become like a pastiche of ideas from the elders, integrated with the ideas of domesticated plants and animals. So the disappearance of numerous songs about the flora and fauna reveals that the Mah Meri no longer interact with these animals and plants. Therefore, spontaneity of daily experiences ceased to inspire song text creations. The transformation of the mangrove and peat forests to oil palm plantations had destroyed the biodiverse natural environment in Carey Island. So from an ecomusicological approach, the changes in the content of the Mah Meri songs manifest that the natural environment's responses to the human impact, and it reveals to us on the loss of biodiversity, which is actually important for the natural order in nature. Its loss will gradually impact the earth in time to come. Okay, so this is the song I collected. Maybe you want to hear a little bit about it. This is already in 2008 that I collected this song. So what I noticed was that the first verse was the traditional verse from the elders. The second and third verse were by the singer, Masna. The fourth verse was by her mother. So they have integrated all these ideas, intergenerational ideas into this song. So the first verse is talking about crabs, about how the crabs create mounds when they are walking onto the beach. And then suddenly there's this idea of, oh, welcome, visitors arrived, we will perform the jo'o for you. So then there are things like, if you want to know more, this is the Jairazbhoy song, this is the Moyang Jairazbhoy. And Masna says, don't forget the Main Jo'o, telling the tourists when you go off, don't forget us here. And then the last verse is by her mother. Main Jo'o, don't be shy, so it's integrated with this kind of a tourist thing, old ideas and new ideas integrated together. The transcription. Okay, so in general, for ecomusicology, I could just talk about the decline in the focus on flora and fauna, and into making a statement that it tells us something about the environment, and maybe an urgent warning to us. So that is what I could talk about in ecomusicology. So the last thing I will talk about is more on ecoperformativity. How does ecoperformativity fit into this, the Mah Meri performance? So John McDowell, this is his interpretation of ecoperformativity. It's a current movement that utilizes sound, music, and movement to voice concerns on environmental problems. Ecoperformativity motivates collaborative research between local and indigenous groups whose voices on environmental problems are ignored in public discourses. So I extend the term ecomusicology to ecoperformativity, as the Mah Meri performance traditions are not just limited to musical sounds. It's produced by the musicians. It's actually an overall, it includes dance, it includes movements, it includes costumes too. So ecoperformativity is a current movement. So in recent years, there have been conscious movements by institutions and organizations to voice their dissatisfaction about the environment through performance. While the Mah Meri are not consciously promoting eco-performativity, their stance to project their natural environment through songs, music, and dance is actually subconsciously speaking of their love, their nostalgia for the natural, pristine environment that they used to live in, and the diverse ecosystem that surrounded them. So in my PhD dissertation, I focused mainly on using performance theories and tourism theories, talking about staging authenticity to assert identity. But because of the urgency of what's happening to Carey Island, I'm trying to channel this into ecoperformativity. So put on stage to perform to local tourists, the Mah Meri take this opportunity to sort of talk about their identity, so assert their identity through costume, music, and performance. So here you will see that in the 1900s, this is the 1950s to 2000, this is a picture of what was happening during festivals and recreations. So the costumes were actually really very simple. They were just dressed in batik skirts and long sleeve shirts. These are the musicians themselves. But if you look at, even the dancers themselves were mainly just, you have some strips of leaves and some simple decorations. But when tourism came in, this is how they sort of recreated their costumes. So you see the skirts, what inspired these skirts? They were actually from the decorations. All those decorations up there that they used to hang during rituals or ceremonies, like the fish, the mud lobsters, the prawn, the shrimps, the fishes, were inspired into their costume. Okay, so previously they would just wear a normal t-shirt, but now they actually took the bark of the cloth and kind of like stamped the cloth to create the notion of authenticity. And then the flowers, and then this is one of the type of skirt, they call it the Hawaiian skirt. So the types of skirts, the Hawaiian skirt, the palm blossom skirt, the earring or noose skirt. So all these were inspired by the decorations for rituals. Previously, they don't even put a headgear, but now they have this palm blossom headgear, and this comes from the nooses. So in some ways, they're actually performing the environment. They're performing the animals and the plants in the environment. Okay, if we look at the mass dancers, previously the mass dancers were this. Their masks were made from palm fronds, very simple palm fronds. But now they carve the mask from the wood, kind of a native wood nearby, and this becomes their mask to be worn by their mass dancers. So yeah, in some ways that we could channel this to voice that they are talking about the environment, although they are not subconsciously talking about it. Oh, was it fast? Okay. So in conclusion, in a time of global warming, I'm exploring how the Mah Meri's performing traditions can be used to amplify their concerns regarding environmental degradation and loss of traditional territories. I believe this voice is important not only for the Mah Meri and actually for the global community. Small voices, gradual actions, and detailed documentation that is consistent may help address larger issues at hand in future. Ethnomusicologists working hand in hand with the indigenous people to assist them in voicing their plights maybe is actually one branch that the ethnomusicologist is moving into today and in future. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.